I want you to imagine, just for a second, a really tense conversation. You're sitting across from someone, and they are delivering this harsh, entirely unwanted reality to you.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. And they're speaking with this intense conviction, like they are absolutely refusing to back down.
Yeah, holding their ground completely.
Exactly. Now, on the surface, there are two entirely different scenarios that can look exactly like this. I mean, to anyone who's walking into the room, they look completely identical.
Right, indistinguishable.
But underneath, like in the invisible architecture of that conversation, these two scenarios are operating on entirely opposite logic.
Yes.
One of them is this profound act of genuine honesty, and the other is actually an act of deep coercive control.
And that surface resemblance, the fact that they look identical, is a huge part of why this dynamic creates so much quiet devastation in a relationship.
For sure.
We just don't realize what's actually happening until we're incredibly tangled up in it.
Which is exactly why we're doing this today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are going to explore that invisible architecture of that exact room.
It's such an important topic.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to give you, the listener, the specific tools to tell the difference. Not just when you're sitting across from someone else, but honestly when you're looking in the mirror too.
Because it's so easy to trick ourselves. What's fascinating here is the persistent inversion of how these behaviors are perceived.
What do you mean by inversion?
Well, a person who is genuinely honest is very often accused of being controlling.
Oh, interesting.
Right. But meanwhile, a person who's deeply controlling almost always believes, with complete sincerity, that they are simply being honest.
Wow, so they actually think they're doing the right thing.
Exactly. It's not just an accidental mix-up. It's a structural confusion built into how we communicate.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if they look the exact same from the outside, we really have to look beneath that surface behavior to figure out what's generating it.
Yes, we have to look at the mechanics.
Right. It seems to be the core difference has to be about where the focus is pointing. Like, who is this statement actually for?
That is the fundamental distinction, honestly. It's about directionality.
Directionality.
Okay. So honesty is self-referential. When you are being honest, you're producing a statement about your own interior.
Like your own feelings.
Right. Your perception, your feeling, your experience, basically your truth as you know it. And then you release that statement into the space between you and the other person.
And you just let it sit there.
Exactly. You don't require the other person to receive it in any particular way. It doesn't need to produce a specific result.
I see.
Control, by contrast, is always other-directed. It actually requires the other person to change.
So they have to do something about it.
They have to behave differently or feel differently or understand differently for the controlling person's internal state to finally resolve.
Which means honesty uses itself to find resolution, but control is like using the other person as its instrument.
That's a perfect way to put it. If we look at the internal mechanics, we can think of it as a loop.
Okay, a loop.
Honesty closes a loop inside the speaker. The internal state is completed simply by the act of speaking out loud, regardless of what happens next.
So just saying it's the resolution.
Right. But control, however, opens a loop that can only be closed by the listener's compliance.
Oh, wow. It sounds like honesty is a thermometer, like it's just reading the temperature of your internal room and telling you what the temperature is.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, but control is trying to be the thermostat. It's actively forcing the other person to heat up or cool down so that you can feel comfortable in the room.
That imagery captures it perfectly, and the reason the controlling person is desperately trying to adjust that thermostat comes down to the fear architecture underneath their behavior.
Fear architecture.
Yeah.
So it's driven by fear.
Nearly always. Controlling behavior is almost entirely generated by fear. Specifically, it's an anxiety that the person just cannot tolerate in stillness.
I can't just sit with it.
No, they can't. Because they can't sit with that anxiety, it has to be externalized. It has to be redistributed and managed through their environment.
And the people in their environment.
Exactly. The more someone controls, the more they are revealing about how profoundly unsafe their own interior feels.
Which totally reframes why people who are acting incredibly controlling often claim they're the ones under attack.
Yes. From inside their experience, what they are doing genuinely feels like self-preservation.
That's wild. So they don't see themselves as the bad guy.
Not at all. Every deviation from their expectation isn't just, a preference not being met. It registers as an active threat to their survival.
So they genuinely do not perceive themselves as dominating another person.
Right. They perceive themselves as responding to an emergency. To them, managing you is an absolute necessity.
Now, to be clear, honest people feel fear too, right? It's not like genuine honesty requires you to be some fearless, enlightened monk.
Oh, for sure. Honesty absolutely coexists with fear. You can be completely terrified of the consequences of speaking the truth, and you speak it anyway.
Right.
That vulnerability is arguably the defining experience of genuine honesty. But the difference is that the fear isn't the engine.
It's not powering the action.
Exactly. The fear doesn't determine whether you speak. It's just, sitting in the passenger seat.
Okay, I get it.
In controlling behavior, fear is driving the car. The total absence of the feared outcome is the only goal.
So if control is basically just mask anxiety driving the car, it has to actively hide what it's doing. Because if someone literally said, hey, I'm terrified, so I need to dictate your every move, we'd all just run for the hills.
Right. Nobody would put up with that.
So instead, it walks around wearing the clothes of, like, truth-telling.
It actively camouflages itself. And the literature points out several recurring ways control disguises itself as honesty to persist without objection.
Okay, where are they?
The most common one is weaponized transparency.
Oh, the classic, look, I'm just being honest here. Right before they drop something totally awful on you,
Yes, I'm just being honest, is used as a social permission flip.
it's like a shield.
Exactly. It pre-disables any objection you might have. Once someone announces they are participating in the virtue of honesty, they feel completely free to deliver contempt or criticism or humiliation.
Like they've just given themselves a free pass.
Right. The label of honesty doesn't sanitize the cruel content. It just launders it. Genuine honesty doesn't need a public relations preamble.
It doesn't need a warning label.
It doesn't need to announce itself at all.
It just speaks the truth and lets it sit there. And then there's a situation where someone doesn't even use a preamble. They just dump a hard truth on you completely out of the blue.
Unsolicited truth delivery.
Yeah, I always think of that relative at Thanksgiving who feels this undeniable urge to be honest about your new haircut or your career choices,
Yeah.
completely unsolicited.
Delivering your truth without invitation is a major imposition.
It really is.
If you haven't been asked for your truth, deciding to deliver it anyway is a unilateral decision about what you are going to do to another person's space, regardless of their consent.
Let me push back on that for just a second, though. Because what if someone is in actual danger? Or what if the relationship itself requires this kind of transparency?
Like what?
Well, let's say my friend's partner is cheating on them. If I withhold the truth just because it's unsolicited, isn't that a form of deception?
That is a crucial distinction, and it's great you brought that up. The source texts explicitly validate that exception.
Okay.
There are absolutely contexts where an honest person speaks without being asked, like when someone is in imminent danger, or when silence becomes a lie of omission,
Right.
or when a mutual covenant in a relationship like a marriage demands full transparency. But outside of those immediate safety concerns or mutual covenants, forcing your truth onto an unconsenting receiving body is just a data transfer where the other person has absolutely no agency.
You're just forcing them to hold your anxiety.
Exactly. The context of consent really is everything there.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the people who do have the right to speak to us honestly, but they seem to wait for the absolute worst possible moment, like dropping a heavy emotional truth bomb right as you're literally walking out the door for a massive presentation, or when you're just completely exhausted at the end of the day?
That brings us to the third disguise. Strategic timing.
Strategic timing.
Right. The content of what they are saying might be technically true, but the timing converts that truth into a power move.
It becomes a weapon.
Deploying a hard truth when someone is vulnerable or tired or in a public space where they can't easily react, that means the speaker is calculating the optimal moment of impact.
And genuine honesty isn't tactical like that.
No, it isn't. It doesn't look for an unfair advantage.
Because if you're calculating an advantage, you are trying to manage an outcome which circles right back to control.
Precisely.
And I imagine the clearest sign that you're trying to manage an outcome is when you just won't drop it, when you just keep saying the same thing over and over.
The repetition trap. This is perhaps the clearest behavioral marker where honesty ends and control begins.
Because you've already said it.
Right. Saying a true thing once is honest. Repeating it over and over because the listener didn't react the right way is coercion.
The speaker probably thinks, well, the facts haven't changed, so I'm still just being honest.
Hmm.
But what changes is the sheer force they are applying.
Exactly. When you repeat a true statement simply because you didn't get the desired emotional or behavioral response, think about what that repetition actually communicates.
What does it communicate?
It implicitly says three things. First, you're not having changed yet is a problem. Second, I am going to continue applying this pressure until you change.
Wow.
And third, this conversation is not over until you give me the response I need to soothe my own anxiety.
So it's entirely about their anxiety again.
It is using the repetition of true content to generate a heavy, cumulative psychological weight.
Those disguises, weaponized transparency, unsolicited truth dumps, strategic timing, the repetition trap. They are so subtle.
Very subtle.
We can so easily convince ourselves we're just being good, honest people. We really need a more reliable lie detector. Because our minds can be tricked by the fact that the content is technically true. But I feel like the body doesn't lie.
It doesn't. The body is incredibly literal. Controlling behavior and genuine honesty produce distinctly different somatic signatures, like actual physical sensations.
Okay, tell me about those. What does control feel like?
Controlling behavior tends to produce a clenching quality. Your jaw tightens. Your breath shortens.
Like you're tensing up.
Yes. There is a heavy surveillance quality to it. Your eyes are intensely tracking the other person's face, waiting to see if the outcome you desperately want is materializing.
So you're hyper-focused on them.
Right. Your nervous system is on alert, and the energy is very forward-leaning.
You're braced for impact, ready to counterattack if they don't comply.
Exactly. But genuine honesty, when it is clean, feels like a release.
A release.
Yes. The truth gathers, rises, and exits. And after it's spoken, there is a sense of completion.
Like letting out a breath.
Exactly. It leaves you feeling vulnerable, often with a physical openness in the chest. Your body doesn't stay in surveillance mode because fundamentally there is nothing left to manage.
And just like our physical tension gives us away, the specific grammar we use is a dead giveaway too. The language itself maps out exactly what we're trying to do.
It really does. Control relies heavily on other-centered grammar.
Give me an example.
Sentences that start with, you always do this, or you need to see that. It positions the speaker as the ultimate authority on the other person's reality.
And honesty.
Honest speech is grammatically self-centered. It relies on, I feel, or in my experience.
Because that's all you really know.
Right. The speaker is mapping their own interior, which is the only interior any of us actually have genuine access to.
There's a really subtle grammatical trap here that I know I've slipped into before, and I think a lot of people do. Think about the difference between saying, you made me feel invisible, versus saying, I felt invisible in that conversation. They sound almost identical, but they operate so differently.
That grammatical shift is not just cosmetic, it's massive.
Right.
Saying, you made me feel invisible, is lodging a charge against the other person. It claims absolute knowledge of causation and positions the other person as the executor of harm.
You're pointing the finger.
Yes. Saying, I felt invisible is simply reporting an interior event. They might both be responses to the exact same frustrating dinner party, but one demands the other person defend their intentions.
And the other just places a truth on the table.
Precisely.
Once you start noticing that difference, you hear it everywhere. So we've got these diagnostic tools. We can check if our jaw is clenched. We can check if our sentences are starting with you.
Which is super helpful in the moment.
It is. But we really need to look at the immense damage this structural confusion causes when it gets normalized. When we mistake control for honesty over a long period of time, it has to completely erode a relationship.
Oh, it destroys them. We can look at John Gottman's decades of research on marriage and relationship communication to see how this plays out over time.
Gottman is the gold standard for this stuff.
He really is. He famously differentiates between a complaint and a criticism, which maps perfectly onto our discussion of honesty versus control.
Okay, how so?
Well, a complaint is specific and self-referential.
So a complaint would be something like, I feel incredibly overwhelmed when I come home and the kitchen is messy. It's just a statement of your own emotional reality in a specific moment.
Exactly. And importantly, it leaves the other person intact. Criticism, on the other hand, is global and other-directed.
How does a criticism sound?
It sounds like you're so lazy you never clean up and you clearly don't care about my time.
Ouch. It stops being about the kitchen and becomes a total indictment of their character.
And Gottman identified that specific type of criticism as one of the 4 horsemen most predictive of divorce.
Wow. One of the top predictors.
Yes. What makes criticism so destructive isn't just that it might contain some inaccurate information. The damage comes from the fact that it actively attempts to restructure the other person's self-perception.
Which is incredibly invasive.
It is the most intimate form of attempted dominance there is.
And when you look at the research on psychological abuse, it goes even further into that dominance, doesn't it?
It does. Patricia Evans's extensive work on verbal and psychological abuse identifies control as the absolute defining feature of abusive dynamic.
Right, control is the defining feature.
Always. And controllers frequently weaponize accurate facts to maintain that control.
Wait, accurate facts?
Yes. They might deploy completely true observations about a person's flaws or their known forgetfulness or their past mistakes, but they deploy those facts systematically to establish dominance and to make the person doubt their own grasp on reality.
So they're literally using true facts to gaslight someone.
Exactly. The information is real, but the purpose of its delivery is psychological reduction.
What's wild to me is how normalized this dynamic is in our everyday lives. Like, we've been so culturally trained to confuse love with control, it masquerades as affection all the time.
Oh, constantly.
Think about parenting. Extreme oversight and controlling every variable is fiercely protective when a child is 3 years old. But if that dynamic fails to evolve, you end up with a parent trying to aggressively manage the interior of a 25-year-old adult.
Which is exhausting for everyone involved. Or look at romantic relationships.
Oh, rom-coms.
Right. We have countless movies, songs, and cultural scripts that encode surveillance, intense jealousy, and needing to know a partner's every move as the ultimate evidence of devotion.
We've literally been taught that if a partner actually gives us total autonomy and doesn't try to manage us, we panic and assume they must just not care about us.
It's tragic. This learned equation between oversight and devotion is one of the most persistent sources of relational suffering across generations.
I entirely see that.
The literature highlights that many people literally experience the absence of controlling behavior as abandonment.
That is so profound.
And it's important to note the sources point out that this lands exceptionally heavily within a gendered double bind.
The asymmetry there is profound. Let's think about this in a workplace setting.
Good example.
If a woman speaks honestly, direct, self-referential, without softening the edges or adding a bunch of emojis and exclamation points to her emails, she is frequently categorized culturally as aggressive or controlling.
Happened all the time.
But the exact same direct content, delivered in the exact same register by a male colleague, is widely categorized as forthright, authoritative, and honest.
Women face a double bind where their genuine honesty is punished under the label of control.
While men get praised for it.
Exactly. And conversely, women are heavily culturally trained from a young age to translate controlling behavior from partners or figures of authority as evidence of love.
They learn to read being controlled as being cared for.
Yes. Therefore, the reclamation of honest speech for women is framed in the literature as a fundamental reclamation of personal sovereignty.
It's taking their power back.
It's the radical act of speaking the truth without bending it into a shape that makes the listener feel comfortable.
With all of these societal scripts tangled up, confusing control for love, punishing directness, how do we find a clean, objective baseline?
We need a solid framework.
Right. If we really want to test our own behavior, beyond just our grammar and our tight jaws, what's the ultimate framework?
Eastern philosophical traditions look at this tension through a really elegant lens of temperature and alignment.
Temperature. It's like hot and cold.
Sort of, yes. They view genuine honesty as a cool or clear state, often referred to as sattvic. It carries the quality of inner alignment and balance.
And I like that.
It is an act that is complete in itself. It doesn't grasp, and it doesn't need to manage what happens next.
Uncontrol.
Control, on the other hand, is viewed as a hot or rajasic state. It is dualistic, driven by ego and agitation. It requires a controller and a controlled.
So it's inherently chaotic.
Very. That hot mindset absolutely cannot bear uncertainty. It constantly has to arrange and manipulate the external world to soothe its own internal chaos.
Which brings us right back to self-deception.
Yeah.
If your own internal story is fragile or built on a foundation you don't actually believe, you have to control the outside world with incredible intensity.
That's the core of it. People who deeply struggle with self-honesty control their environment and the people in it with unusual intensity.
To protect themselves.
Exactly. If your internal narrative cannot survive scrutiny, you must ensure the external world provides no friction.
Wow.
The capacity to be genuinely honest with another person depends entirely on the capacity to be profoundly honest with yourself first.
So pulling all these threads together, the fear driving the car, the subtle disguises, the cultural conditioning, the internal heat, what is the ultimate test?
The bottom line.
Right. How do you know right now, in the middle of a conversation, if you are being honest or if you're being controlling?
The cleanest single test is this. Can you say the true thing out loud and genuinely not care what the other person does with it?
Let's clarify that, because it's not that you don't care about the person, right?
Yeah.
You obviously still love your partner or care about your friend.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that you don't care about managing the outcome of the truth. Honesty is a movement outward, while control is a grip.
Exactly. It is the willingness to let the truth exist in the room, even if it results in distance, even if it is met with anger or rejection, or even if it changes absolutely nothing about their behavior.
You just let it be.
If your truth-telling is contingent on the other person receiving it a certain way, and you experience their noncompliance as a reason to say it again, louder and harsher, you are attempting to force a specific outcome in another person's interior.
And that is control.
That is control.
We have covered massive ground today. The major paradigm shift here is realizing that merely delivering facts does not make you honest if your ultimate goal is to shrink, manage, or manipulate someone else.
It's all about the intention behind the facts.
Exactly. True honesty is about closing your own internal loop, dropping the truth into the space between you, and having the courage to step back.
As you move forward, remember to check your body. The next time you have to speak a hard truth, notice your physical state.
Run that diagnostic on yourself.
Is your jaw tight? Are your eyes tracking them? Are you leaning forward to force an outcome? Or is your chest open, accepting whatever happens next?
Such a powerful, immediate diagnostic tool. To wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, unaddressed thread to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We spent this entire time talking about what happens when we speak. But think about the reverse. If genuine honesty means speaking your truth without needing a specific outcome, what truths are you currently keeping completely silent about, just because you know you can't control how the other person will react?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Right. And what is that silence actually costing you?
That is an incredibly important question for all of us to reflect on as we examine our own relationships.
It really is. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep seeking the truth behind the surface, and remember, the next time you find yourself in one of those tense conversations, you now know exactly what to look for.
Thanks for listening.
Take care, everyone.